obviously. We want to bring in Goldman Sachs senior partner and Donald Trump supporter Peter Kiernan. He is with us joining the conversation on set. Peter, good to see you.
Great to be with you again.
Is this Trumpism?
Well, I think there's a rhetoric that you're hearing repeated all across the globe, and I don't think this is an isolated incident. Euroscepticism is going to be in full flower, and I think we're going to see a lot of examples of what happened last night elsewhere in Europe.
Kevin Kelly.
Yeah, I think there's something significant going on here, and one of the reasons why the market is selling off is because of the banks, right? I mean, the banks here not only have to face increased regulation when it comes to Dodd-Frank, over 22,000 pages of regulations that no one understands and no real legislator read. Now they don't know the uncertainty with trade going into the EU through the United Kingdom.
And the regulatory reform.
Yeah,
you make such an important point right now, because all of the rulemaking has to be created and redone in Britain.
And this isn't a slow growth environment, not only here in the United States, but across the globe, right? So there are some worries now. So, I mean, look at interest rates. So my question to you is what is the best way for the United States to thrive in this type of environment? I mean, Donald Trump just said that he talked about trade and he talked about infrastructure. So how do we actually thrive in an uncertain environment like this?
Well, I think one of the things we can do is double down on ourselves. You mentioned infrastructure, and that's an area we've been notoriously bad at kind of keeping pace with what was once a world-class infrastructure. I'm not so worried about the U.S. banks. And, Frank, I'm not so worried about the U.S. economy. I think we're going to figure this out. About 20% of our exports go to the EU, and of that, about 20% goes to the U.K. I think we'll survive. I'm a little concerned about dollar headwinds right now. I think our industrials are better at weak dollar performance when it comes to exports, obviously. But long term, I think we're going to be just fine. I'm not terribly worried, and I don't think the response today is so absolutely awful, given what the uncertainties may be.
I'm really glad you brought up the dollar situation, because Janet Yellen, for the last 2 times that she spoke to the public, said there's going to be significant economic repercussions should Britain leave. And I think one of the reasons why is because a stronger dollar. We've seen actually a run-up from the lows in February because the dollar did get weaker, so it lended support to oil as well as other commodities. So do you think that there could be really knock-on effects throughout the economy throughout the rest of the year?
You know, I'm not terribly worried. I do think we're probably going to have the summer of love in terms of no interest rate hikes. But frankly, what's going on here is a cross-current that's going to take a little time to figure out. I know that Article 50 says you take 2 years. My opinion is that the financial organizations are going to move much quicker than that.
I agree with you.
And so the notion that they give you it doesn't mean you take it.
One thing that Simon pointed out I thought was really interesting is how your friends feel in Britain. That's actually critical to how the UK economy performs, because it's that very kind of freeze up, if you will. Their behavior and the behavior of companies and business investment, that will really dictate in the short run, with asset prices falling, what do they do and how do they act? That's recession or not.
Yeah, that's an absolutely critical thing, because although it was a very firm let's leave the European Union, there were still a lot of people who wanted to stay. I mean, you know, even if they weren't the majority, and so they really matter, and there's some very smart people among them, very talented, and one wonders what they'll do, and one hopes that they do what Ambassador Bolton said, which was to just knuckle down and do some hard work.
If you want to buy an apartment, if you will.
So what happens in terms of the ECB, in terms of the Bank of England? I mean, Peter, you just said, look, summer of love, we're not going to see an interest rate increase. I agree. This is sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back. Janet Yellen is not going to be able to raise interest rates. But do you expect the Bank of England to continue to buy British pounds, given the 31-year low on the British pound this morning? And what about the ECB?
I think the central banks will intervene. I don't think they'll do a lot of good, because, frankly, this has to seek its own level. So they'll spend some money. They'll take the helicopter out and throw some pound sterling out. But I don't think it's going to have a dramatic impact. What's sort of interesting in terms of the mood of the country, people I talk to, the people who are in Remain were using dire forecasts and fear rather than aspirational outcomes. I think Cameron had to go. We need an aspirational leader. Whoever the next aspirational leader is can take his country to a new place. I don't think it's the end of the world as we know it. There are too many people who rely on UK purchases in Europe because they have one of those economies that runs a trade deficit.
Yeah. Does this help Donald Trump? Before you go, I want to get your take on Donald Trump. He did seem a little more measured, at least at the beginning of that speech, just there from Scotland. But we've been hearing stories of his cash crunch. I know he's had a good couple of days and a good week. But how's the fundraising going?
Well, it's hard to comment on the fundraising. He will tell you that it's going magnificently. I would say thematically this is very good for Trump, because when you go to a foreign country and say, if you don't do what my friend here wants, you're going to the back of the queue, that doesn't help. And I think Hillary has identified and aligned herself with that thinking. The tide of history is turning, and I think Trump is in the right place. If he can be presidential, this will help him a great deal. Measured is what I would suggest for him right now.